everybody, and welcome to Break Time Conversations, a YouTube channel where I have conversations around the theme of education. I have been a teacher all my life, and along my journey, I have met so many interesting and inspiring people. And so I decided to document my conversations with them here so that you too can hear their stories and the amazing work that they do. I'm here today with Sharanya Iyer. She's a principal architect at STUDIO VERGE. And no, she's not from the field of education. But the reason she's here with me today is because she does a lot of interesting workshops with children. And it all started because of her son and having to do a project with him. So she does mud workshops. She gets children to touch and feel and learn about earth construction and so much more. And before I make a mess of it, Sharanya, I'm just going to hand it over to you and ask you to tell us your journey and how you got started with all these workshops.
Thank you, Anupa. It's so cool that you're doing this, and thank you for having me here. So it started with me taking my son. I'm a single mom, so I end up taking my son to site very often. And he ends up asking a lot of interesting questions. And as a person who also teaches architecture students, I realized that some of these questions are way more intriguing and exciting for me than straightforward technical and, construction related or structure related kind of questions. So I kind of nudge him along, and, I used to play with him, and it became like a game, like a treasure hunt where you find a location in a plan and he's able to orient himself and find that spot like within seconds. So then I realized that there is this intuitive sense and this need to learn which children have. And this formal education of learning to be an architect or learning to be something kind of kills that natural motivation and enthusiasm. So I opened out site so the last time we did a cob workshop, we had 48 children over at site in 2 batches. And we went through a sequence of, understanding what happens at site. First of all, starting with the lay of the land, because children are so used to an urban setting. So this need to respond to something natural, that we are in nature and that we are rooted and grounded in a setting, and responding to that is primary in terms of views or sunlight or, orientation, and where is the breeze coming from, questions like this about understanding the lay of the land. So I feel it makes them grounded in where we are, where we belong, an identity of sorts to a natural setting. So I think not only is it about the earth, but this whole grounding with nature and a natural setting, which I found could happen through a very simple one-day workshop with children.
Wow, nice. And I think so important for our urban kids, right? I mean, I feel like now we're all just within the 4 walls, and getting out there is like such a novelty these days.
Yeah.
Can you tell us more about, you mentioned something about cob workshops. Can you tell us more about that?
Yeah. So I came up with a little sequence of activities as to what children can do. And I did a trial run with children from my son's school. And then we opened it out to general public and people coming to site. So we were building a cob house. So instead of it being a workshop wherein they're not actually constructing something, but doing little demonstrations, I thought it'll be nice to take them to a real site where there are masons working and there are other people actually working and measuring and using a plumb bob or a level tube, all these other implements like digging and, doing all these other real things. And it's not a experimental kind of a closed setting, a lab setting, but a real site. So it was fun to see. The first exercise we did was to see what you can build with, the bare minimum, like what do you have on site and what can you build with that as is, without trying to buy anything, without trying to source anything. What can you build with what you have in a site? So it was called, we divided them into groups, and of course we had some interns helping them. And so they walked around site and they collected all kinds of pebbles and sticks and, little pieces of leaves. And some of them, of course, came back with mud. I didn't want to prompt that because they also saw buildings. So it was quite evident that you could build with the earth. So many of them came back with little blobs of mud, which they tried to mix and feel and, try to see what they can do with it. So it started with this little exercise, which they didn't want to stop because they started doing these elaborate structures and leaning it on various things, and all kinds of things they were doing. And finally we walked around each of these little projects. Each group, we had 5 groups of 5 or 6 groups of 5 children each. So each group explained what they did and how they discussed and how they came up with this thing, and they demonstrated how it can be used, like how can they sleep inside it, or how can they almost live inside these little structures they built. And of course, the other children asked questions as to what will happen when it rains, what will happen if snakes come, what will happen if the wood gets eaten. So, all these other questions of durability, maintenance. So, without looking at it as an architectural problem where we're thinking of structure, stability, durability, these questions came up naturally as they were discussing and asking each other questions. And then we got into how can it be made more stable. Like if you look at an anthill, so conveniently we have anthills in rural sites, so we can take them to show an anthill where there's a stabilizer which makes earth like more stable and not melt away with the rain, not be eaten so easily by bugs, so it'll last longer. So what is the stabilizer, and what else can be a stabilizer which kind of holds and glues this earth together, where it becomes flexible to make other things with the earth. So we kind of led on into this, and then into the actual workshop, and types of soils and clay, silt, and sand content in the soil, how to do a basic test. Then once we started off mixing the soil, there was no stopping anyone. They all dived in and crawled on the floor and mixed, and had a great time.
Wow. So it's like this is truly experiential learning, and it's a combination of so many things, like you're teaching them about soil and everything. That's very, very interesting. So how long typically is one of these workshops? How many days?
We did one day.
Okay.
So the first half, before it got too hot, we did all of these. Then, the initial introduction, then actual making of cob, wherein you're mixing like a little bit of straw, and then you're mixing 2 types of soils to get the right composition. If the soil is not clay enough, you have to mix some nursery soil. So all of these kind of mixing and all, we did second half. And they actually built on site with the masons for a couple of hours. Of course, most of them didn't want to go back home end of the day. And there were many parents who joined their kids on site because it was kind of far away and they had to bring them over anyway. So they got little chatais to lie down in the sun. Then by the end of it, I think we had parents and children and everybody building cob walls with our masons. So that's what
Wow.
happened.
So is it just a one-time thing, or do you have like a follow-up workshop or anything?
Yeah, so COVID was a was
Yeah.
a washover, so we couldn't do much after. So we are doing other earth structures. During COVID, we did rammed earth. So that's like putting shuttering and actually pugging in earth into narrower walls, not as wide as 1.5 feet cob walls. So we have been doing other experimental projects, and I would like to open up sites. So we are opening up a site, hopefully end of this month, where we're doing both rammed earth and cob. And the children, I would prefer to call children on site. We haven't thought of a follow-up, but it's an interesting idea to see what happens at different levels because walls get narrower because of the load. So it'll be nice to do a follow-up and they come back and see what happened later.
That's nice. So what's your whole intention of doing these workshops? Do you have like a learning outcome or anything? Have you thought about that?
Yeah, so learning outcome, I think the main learning outcome is for them to understand that very simple living is possible. And we have cluttered our life with very complex requirements and needs. And I feel that is one of my primary objectives, to make simple living a possibility, because as we are evolving as a group of people or civilization, these needs are becoming more and more complex, and our thought processes are so, I feel even as an architect, like this grounded kind of construction makes me think of things in a much simpler way and in a much more authentic kind of way to respond to what I need, what is justified in asking, how am I justified in asking, and for how much can I ask? So can I build like this monstrous house, and does it make sense? So I hope that is a takeaway wherein they go back as people who can optimize what they need, and therefore their life becomes simpler. They don't have to try to earn so much, do so much, but they can have a more content life without struggling to cope up with conventional kind of norms of income and success and all
Yeah,
of those.
brilliant and so badly needed. I think all of us need to learn how to think of a simpler way of living, right? I mean, everything's becoming so complicated. That's so lovely, Sharanya. So, have you ever thought of bringing this program to schools? Have you ever
I
thought of?
would like to. I would like to, but I was also thinking that it's more relevant when it's at a real site, because even in an urban context, we've done some mud homes. So I feel that as a vision, like I would like children to see it and more children to see it. And schools are places where there's so many children at one place. So obviously, like it'll be a great place to take such workshops to. The only constraint is that because we take them to real sites, we have to time it with our construction and school timelines and construction timelines and those kind of
Yeah.
maybe fine tune.
Or you can
Yeah,
just offer it as a program and then you can take the school children to the site or
yeah,
something like that, right?
yeah, yeah.
It was so lovely hearing about all that you do. And before we end, any exciting plans for now that things are opening up and hopefully COVID is going away? Any exciting plans?
Yeah, so I hope to do some smaller mud construction modules in the city itself. So looking at cob furniture, like, what can you do as a frame, and can you do a mud plaster, or can you do something which is more like in the city and in a context where children can take home and actually try like things in their own urban settings rather than in a detached kind of rural setting. So I'm looking at things like that wherein experimentation can happen, and it can be in our office terrace and children can come here, and I'm just looking at how that could be possible.
Lovely, 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 lovely. And my son would love to come for one of your workshops. So if there's anything coming up,
Sure.
please let us know. Sharanya, thank you and all the best. And I hope that many more people hear about what you're doing and learn how to live simpler lives.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Sharanya. Bye for now.
Bye.